Dear all, on behalf of the CFO Coalition for the SDGs, we want to welcome all of you to today's session on financing for the SDGs. The UN has estimated a $3 to $5 trillion financing gap for the SDGs, and the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has increased the need for SDG financing, especially from the private sector. For this, the role of companies and their finance teams is critical. At the same time, we've seen a change in the role of chief financial officers. As stewards of trillions of dollars in corporate investments, CFOs increasingly play a critical role in building economies that work for everyone, aligning business and finance with society and the environment. Inside companies, sustainability considerations cannot be siloed to a single sustainability officer or department. CFOs, as part of the executive management, must exercise a decisive influence over the strategic, financial, and risk implications of sustainability, and that at every level of the organization. So in 2019, we convened a CFO task force for the SDGs to help close the SDG funding gap, developing principles for SDG investments and financing, and bringing together CFOs from across regions and sectors. With the launch of the coalition last year, we aim to give a louder voice to these pioneering CFOs and accelerate SDG integration in corporate finance inside every global compact companies. The coalition is a platform for CFOs to learn and collaborate, recognizing that while transforming corporate strategies is a shared goal, challenges vary across sectors and regions. So with today's session, we hope to shed light on how companies and their CFOs can invest in the SDGs. I want to thank all the companies that are part of the CFO Coalition, our co-chairs, and also welcome our new signatories to the CFO Principles. Thank you.
Distinguished attendees, it's a pleasure to be with you all. We're excited to continue working on closing the financial gap to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. This year, the CFO Coalition's work is focused around 5 real economy macro sectors: industrial goods, consumer goods, real estate, construction and materials, energy and utilities, and technology, media, and telecommunications. This unique network of CFOs stretches around the world, developing critical work around promoting meaningful corporate SDG investments, enhancing the credibility of SDG-linked finance, and creating a global CFO community for the SDGs. We have ambitious goals. By the end of 2024, we intend to have over 1,000 participating CFOs at different levels of entry, ensuring that our work is globally accessible. Our growing group of CFOs are setting SDG investment targets, driving towards trillions in committed SDG-aligned investments and SDG-linked finance by 2025. These huge commitments, coupled with the global footprints the UNGC local networks, will help us raise awareness on the critical role chief financial officers play in achieving the SDGs. Today's session will give you a chance to hear from inside some of our member CFOs, including the coalition's 2 co-chairs, Mr. Alberto De Paoli, Chief Financial Officer of Enel, and Mr. Scott Matter, Chief Investment Officer at PIMCO. The session will also feature Mr. Kushik Chatteri, Tatil Steel CFO. We will present our collective work and the coalition's ambitions for the next few years, driving towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you again, and I hope you all enjoy today's session.
With less than 10 years to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, the need to unlock private capital and to create a market for mainstream SDG investment is becoming urgent. In September, CFOs in the UN Global Compact CFO Task Force made an initial commitment to invest $500 billion towards the SDGs. This collective commitment reflects the multiple benefits of investing in the SDGs, and the number is expecting to grow substantially as more CFOs join the initiative and set targets on implementation of the CFO principles. Task Force CFOs in various industry sectors have found compelling reasons to invest in the SDGs, from business opportunities to risk management.
What does the sustainability agenda does for a corporation? One side, in my view, is that it prevents it from operating negatively. So in a way is controlling and reducing the risk of mishaps. And this is at the basis of good governance. On the other side, in parallel to that, it is setting it up to operate with the logic and objectives that make it successful through a long-term investments in all the key capitals that the corporation has and leverages: financial capital, human capital, technological capital, and resources capital. And by bringing them all together, it makes the magic of generating the broader and largest value for all the stakeholders.
Well, I think if we stick as an example to the energy, about the energy transition, there are really two things that matter. I mean, very basic things, complex to put in place, but very basic things. The first one is there's a huge opportunity there. The renewable, the need for renewable finance grows about 15 to 20% a year, and we're talking here about hundreds of billions. And of course, the need for energy infrastructure will continue to grow as investment, public and private investment in energy transition grow. But there is another side of the equation, which is the risk management. Investors do understand and increasingly are aware of the risk associated with sticking to sectors which will become more and more obsolete, which will face reputation risk, which will face more difficulty to access to liquidity because banks would be reluctant to lend to them and facing some liquidity risk. So there is a whole topic about potential stranded assets that is emerging within the investor community. So it's on both sides that investors are becoming aware of the equation.
You have positive impacts on image, but also a lot of risk mitigation, attraction for better people, more qualified people to work for the company. And as I said in the beginning, new business development. We are, as the world shifts, we are shifting the business together with it, and that leads to new businesses. So all of that together, I think, is what we are pushing for.
The demand for sustainable investment continues to grow as investors increasingly realize the opportunity to finance the SDGs through companies. CFOs in the task force are playing a critical role in the development of sustainable finance markets. Along with SDG investment, they committed to link close to 50% of all corporate financing to sustainable performance. For CFOs, this means setting strong KPIs and targets for SDG impact and tying corporate investment and financing to performance.
Creating KPIs that help mobilize capital and mobilize efforts, not only financial capital, but human capital needs to be mobilized here as well, is what we believe as CFOs will drive engagement. And that's what the CFO task force is pursuing, taking the SDGs and drilling down one degree below the objectives and transforming them into targets, into goals. Around the KPIs and the metrics that we're going to be building, I think we're going to have the success of helping companies to mobilize around their objectives.
For the several thousand projects that we're doing every year, and literally 20,000 projects are ongoing at any particular point in time, across 1,000 plus clients around the globe, how can we embed our expertise, and we have a lot of it around the globe, in terms of our environmental talent? How do we embed into every single project that we're doing an ability to drive some level of a play on whether it's equality or whether it's sustainability and environmental? And we have the ability to do that with our people. So it becomes much more of a cultural transformation.
In 2022, we are scaling our efforts to create a global CFO initiative for the SDGs and setting out to recruit hundreds of UN Global Compact companies to adopt similar strategies and commitment. This could mobilize trillions of dollars in corporate investments in areas such as sustainable infrastructure, renewable energy, food, and agriculture, and drive the type of collective and voluntary action promoted by the UN Global Compact and its new CFO initiative for the SDGs.
Nothing is in isolation in today's world. So the entire supply chain, whether it is customers or whether it's suppliers, and would also get to know this. And when you start talking about this framework and you talk about the CFO principles, then everybody starts looking at, there's certainly has the potential to create a pull effect rather than a push effect. And not everything can be done by regulations and legislations. There is a lot of space for voluntary work to showcase one's initiatives within an organization. So yes, for sure, the supply chain will be an important part of this whole ecosystem. So every company which is adopting the SDG framework has the opportunity to bring in together collaboratively the supply chain partners and collaborators, and even, if I may say, competitors, to be on the same page, because it's for a common cause.
A very warm welcome to all our distinguished attendees. Thank you so much for joining us at today's session, which is all about financing for the SDGs, organized by the UN Global Compact's CFO Coalition for the SDGs. I'm pleased to welcome you and discuss this important topic and how our collective efforts can help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. In our view, sustainable investing has truly become a global megatrend, with many critical and new and important links to corporate finance. One of the most important and exciting developments, which was spurred by the Global Compact, involves chief financial officers who are now making new commitments to SDG investment, finance, and setting related targets, and really showing the way to add value to all their stakeholders by embracing sustainable development. This is an incredibly important new movement, understanding that CFOs are stewards of more than $15 trillion annually in investments. Therefore, they can be a driving force in achieving the SDGs in our 1.5 degree future. The CFO Coalition for the SDGs, that started only with a few members in late 2019, has now reached over 70 members in the last few months. And this leadership group of the coalition will continue working together to promote further integration of the SDGs in corporate investment and finance and reach many, many more CFOs by the end of the year. The CFO principles, which were also co-developed by members of the coalition, provide a common vision to support companies in the transition to sustainable development, really leveraging corporate finance and the investments that they make towards the realization of the SDGs. The coalition has a very ambitious goal of reaching more than 1,000 signatories by the end of 2024. And that target, coupled with the commitment from the leadership group last September, is really only a starting point. With the strategic support of different partners, including the Global Investors for Sustainable Development, or GISD, as well as the coalition, which we're proud to co-chair at PIMCO, we really think we'll be able to leverage the work being done at the leadership group level. GISD's report, entitled Renewed, Recharged, and Reinforced, calls out for specific actions to fund the SDGs by aligning and renewing both public and private sector collaborative efforts. The 64 recommendations aim to scale up the investments into all the Sustainable Development Goals through blended finance. CEO members of the Alliance, including PIMCO, are collaborating to create financial tools and shape market policies that will move trillions of dollars of private investment in the direction of sustainable development. And that's exactly what we need now. The instrumental collaboration with GISD, we think, will enhance the Global Compact's work in sustainable finance, as the impact of private investments on the SDGs is absolutely fundamental to fight climate change, the inequalities around the world, and really move in the direction of sustainable economic development. We also think that the UN Global Compact's local networks can really help us create awareness across all markets and all geographies around the world. The CFO Coalition for the SDGs, I'm convinced, will continue to show impact and progress in the years to come on a scale that we've never seen before. So I want to thank my co-chair on the coalition, Alberto DePaoli, who's NL's CFO. I also want to thank the UN Global Compact Sustainable Finance team and the teams that support us here at PIMCO and Enel for really helping us get this movement going a few years ago and for their ongoing support. I also want to thank all the members of the coalition and welcome new signatories to the CFO Principles. We very much look forward to working with you in the years to come. Thank you all.
Distinguished attendees, welcome to today's session of Financing for the SDGs, organized by the UN CFO Coalition for the SDG. As we all know, our world continues its struggle within a lot of crises, pandemic, war, refugees, and together with this, and with the attention focused on these problems, inequalities and climate change are raging on. But as the UN Secretary General has said, so to achieve lasting prosperity, we need to build a future that protects people and planet. And we all know in the business sector that this transition to a sustainable, climate-safe future embeds a huge opportunity and a huge amount of investments, business, value creation. This is the aim that we have within this group, the CFO groups, to try to link our business models and our investments to the sustainability and the value creation. This is our aim, and we have, I say, a critical role in reshaping the future and the future of business along this path. As a CFO coalition, we are continuing to develop this concept. Last September, for the first time, we converted principles into actions, and we took commitment to invest in the next 4 years, from 21 to 25, more than 500 billion euros in SDG-aligned investments, and to link our corporate finance for at least 50% on sustainable performance. And we have shared that it is only a starting point, that the leadership member of this coalition will have keep on working on this, promoting further integration of the SDGs in the corporate investments. We are now 70 companies working in the leading group. It means $1.4 trillion of capitalization. And what we are now doing is to encourage ourselves and other companies to report exactly the progress and also actively participate in the activities of the leadership group. What we have to assure is that after having done and after having written the principles, now we walk the talk. And now so principles will be converted into tangible action. We have wide targets. First of all, to complete the leadership group, reaching 100 companies within this year, and then to reach 1,000 signatories of the principle within 2023. This big number that we are seeking for is only to assure us to beat and beat and beat our initial target we have assumed. In Enel, we have already assumed a big target for the future. We want to reach 65% of finance linked to sustainable target within 2024. And we have committed to invest more than 200 million euros in the next 8 years, 95% linked to SDGs. This is a way to present the world how principles can be implemented into activities and how principles can drive prosperity, value creation, a growth of the company that really work in this field. Let me now thank Scott Mather, my friend, that shares the chair of this leadership group. Let me thank the UN team, the PINQNL team that have helped and their precious help to drive this group. Let me thank you, all the members of the coalition. Let me welcome the new signatories that are so relevant to make the whole group working together. And I really hope to meet you in person in Paris on the 3rd of June, where we will discuss together around the SDG aligned investments, around the SDG linked finance, around the role of the CFOs, the EU taxonomy, and why not also to discuss how a sustainable choice can also make and create some new dimension, new concept in the capitalism, bringing this company towards new concepts like the stakeholder capitalism, that is something that deemed to be deeply discussed with you all. I think that UN Global Compact is uniquely positioned to support and help companies along this journey, along the journey to a more sustainable and inclusive future. Thank you very much to you all, and good job.
The CFO is like the true trustee of the stakeholders. And earlier it was more on the shareholders, but it's widened over the last decade into a larger space of stakeholders, which means it is the regulators and the community, and suppliers and customers and employees, and the universe has expanded. And therefore, the CFO's role has kind of evolved from just being on financial stewardship to corporate and sustainable stewardship. And I think that has been the biggest change. It's not that any law has changed. It's actually the expectation of the stakeholders that has defined the change. And that has become a lot more important than today. Earlier, we used to have silos of chief sustainability officers, and then you will have CFOs doing their own job. That line has blurred and continuously blurring as we go forward. For example, and there are reasons for it. For example, capital allocation decisions. Capital allocation decisions are no longer just financial decisions. They are decisions which determine the transformative way in which that organization will move and the pathway it chooses over the next many decades, because that's become critical. If my steel plant's life cycle is 25, 30 years, and making a capital allocation decision just can't be a financial IRR. It has to have all the impacts, whether it is on climate, whether it's on water, whether it's on natural resources, whether it is on all of the SDGs, in fact. And then we say that, yeah, then it is kind of SDG compliant or SDG converged kind of a decision. And therefore, it is a call to action. It is just not the CFOs, but the entire finance community. Every individual, I tell my colleagues that all of them are CFOs as far as sustainability is concerned. Because at the business unit level, at the commercial level, at every level. Because when you look at, for example, climate, then you're looking at scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. So ideally, nothing is left out. So therefore, this is a very important part of the CFO's mandate. And of course, CFOs can help in this journey by working collaboratively with the business, with the sustainability team, the operations team, and so on. And fundamentally look at prioritizing SDGs. How do we get impacted by SDGs? Which SDG, to what extent, what are the KPIs? And how do we impact those SDGs? While the SDGs were essentially made at one level at the country level, it's now percolated down to individual corporates to plan, disclose. And when it comes to stakeholders, they want to see how are you impacting individual SDGs? How is it that you are getting impacted by SDGs and what are your KPIs, actions. And therefore, SDGs, call it ESG, but since we talk about the UN SDG framework more often, that's come front and center of corporate strategy in action. And therefore, the CFO's role in guiding that process is something which has been very, very critical. And if I may say so, it's going to become even more critical in the coming months and years. And therefore, it is a good CFO and somebody who's a professional CFO needs to have his or her lenses wider than just on finance.
Thank you so much for joining this session, Financing for the SDGs. We hope that you have learned more about the role that CFOs can play in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and the work of the CFO Coalition. Our work continues this year. We are hosting SDG regional investment forums for CFO Coalition members throughout the year, with our next one in Paris at the end of this month on June 30th. If your CFO is interested in attending, please get in touch at sustainablefinance@unglobalcompact.org. We're also launching a UN Global Compact Academy session at the end of this month, exploring the 4 CFO principles on integrated SDG investments and finance, and how they can be implemented leveraging corporate finance towards sustainable development, which complement the UNGC 10 principles. This session is open to all UN Global Compact participants, regardless of your role. Thank you.